But still, so you're ready to become Catholic. I'm saying, no, wait a second here. I mean, it's still hard to, when you've been a Christian of a variety of ilks all your life, to accept the authority. That's where you're at.
Yes, it's a hard thing because as a Protestant, you're the ultimate authority. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of Protestants who are offended by that. They say, no, God is the ultimate authority, and sacred scripture is true, but who's interpreting that? You're saying that yourself is the ultimate authority because you're saying, and I'm the one who determines what is right. Based upon what I'm reading in Scripture, I'm the one who interprets it.
So often the phrase is, but the Scriptures say. Right?
According to who?
The Scriptures say, and the people that say that don't realize to what extent what they're really communicating is their opinion of that Scripture or their traditions spin on that Scripture without taking time to realize that the church next door has a different spin on it. And they're both saying Scripture says, but it's saying two different things.
And I was aware of this church next door saying something completely different because I had studied the various groups among Protestants, and I was realizing, okay, some of these people have different views on justification, on baptism. I mean, does this regenerate or not? Is it essential or not? There's all kinds of views out there on important things. These aren't just adiaphora, which is matters that don't really matter to one's salvation. These are matters that are essential for salvation. I mean, justification is huge. You have some Protestants saying, well, the Protestant reformers are wrong on justification and the Catholics kind of were right. Granted, those are few and far in between. Most of them will say that the Catholics are wrong on it. But again, you have some really good exegetes differing on these essential issues. How do I know whose interpretation is authoritative?
Something else that struck me, given your background, you had kind of a good time in New York. All right. Whether good is maybe not the best word to put next to it, but you had a free time in New York. I have known close associates who, even though they have a conversion to Christ and a life-changing experience in the traditions that you mentioned, Baptist, Calvinist, which emphasize a once saved, always saved. In other words, Christ died for my sins in the past, present, and future.
Yeah.
That they end up struggling with, well, what about the moral life? Does it make a difference?
Yeah, that was a huge thing for me because, of course, I came from especially as a Baptist, but then as a Presbyterian, they have, in what's called Calvinism, they have the perseverance of the saints, which isn't exactly once saved, always saved, but it's kind of the same concept. Granted, there is a difference. But essentially, it's saying if you're truly justified, if you're truly one of the elect, you're not going to fall away. And so, still wrestling with some moral issues at that time, I'm asking the question, have I fallen away from God's grace? Have I turned my back on Him? And there are scriptures that say that I can explicitly do this that I just can't explain away. Hebrews 10, Hebrews 6. I mean, there was just, everywhere you turn, there's scripture saying that you can reject the grace of God. I mean, the book of Galatians, that's what it's about. He's telling them not to reject the grace that they've been given in baptism. And so how do I know if I've done that? Well, it was the Catholic understanding of mortal sin that was very helpful for me. That distinguished between mortal sin and venial sin. And also explained, based upon Scripture and tradition, how, in fact, you can lose your salvation. And or you can reject your salvation, I should say. It's not something that you just lose, something that you are turning your back on. And it was also consistent with what I was reading in the early church fathers, who were very adamant on that issue. I don't know any of them who taught the once saved, always saved kind of view. Even Augustine, who had a very strong view of the perseverance of the saints, talked about you have the ability to fall into mortal sin. So I realized that the Catholics have the answer there. And so even later on when I joined the Catholic Church, it was the Catholic understanding of morality that helped me actually become better in some areas that I had struggled with morally as a Protestant.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to imply or that once saved, always saved folk are saying blatantly it doesn't matter what you do.
No,
we don't want to say that. So Luther himself, we've got some quotes in which he seems to say that.
Most wouldn't say that.
No, they wouldn't say that, but they also, when push comes to shove on certain issues, they seem to be the groups that over time succumb to the democratic pressures to start widening that gate of morality.
Yeah.
And pretty soon here we are today with issues of accepted morality in our culture that 50, 75, 100 years ago would never dreamed we'd be where they are. And they aren't just atheists that are buying into stuff. It's Bible-believing Christians.
Yes. Yes.
And there comes the trouble again. Where's the authority?
Exactly. Who determines whether this is a sin or not? And then who determines whether this is, a grave sin? How do we know whether contraception is artificial contraception, whether that is a sin, whether divorce and remarriage is a sin? How do we know these things? You have all kinds of views out there. Well, you need an ultimate authority to determine these things. Surely God would not have left us orphans without a way of knowing these things, without a way of understanding sacred scripture and sacred tradition authoritatively. So, of course, the answer is found in Catholicism.